Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Town Manager, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Mrs. Assistant Town Manager. My name is Dave Wally. I am your Director of Public Works and Municipal Facilities for almost 2 years now. Also, it's important to point out that I've been a resident for almost 24 years now and have 26 years of experience with Public Works, my previous employment. And so, after being here, like I said, almost 2 years, I think it's important to come before the board and kind of give you a snapshot as to where we are in time right now with our infrastructure within the department, our assets, what our employees deal with, the level of service that we're able to provide, and basically try to perhaps, I know there's been a lot of questions asked over the years in living in town of me, and certainly now working with the town. I've heard lots of questions, and I've been doing a lot of listening to a wide faction of people within the community and other departments and municipal leaders. Certain questions like, why don't we plow the sidewalks in town? Why don't we have a full-time chief mechanic? Why don't we sweep the streets? Why don't we have the drop-off center open year-round? Why don't we? Why does it take so long to plow our streets in town? So what I'm hoping to do tonight is just kind of give you a glimpse inside of some of the things.
Just stop for a second.
Sure.
Those are all very interesting. The Public Works Department in this town does a fantastic job.
Yeah.
We have no potholes.
Yeah.
The streets get plowed efficiently. I mean, let's take credit where credit is due. You and your team do a great job.
Yes.
Thank
All right, with limited resources. So thank you.
I agree, and thank you for pausing me on that.
I like that. I like that.
I'm not here to say we're in dire straits and we got all kinds of crises.
I love
We're
that.
not in crisis
You
mode.
guys are out there working your
We're-
tails
we're-
off while we're inside being nice and sitting by the fire.
And we
thank
do,
you.
and probably my own, personal issue is that, I'm always critiquing things and I want to do better and more efficient and
And that's
respond
great.
better.
And
Respond
it
better to the
shows
public.
every day.
So hopefully by the end of this presentation, I'll shed a little bit of light into some of those concerns and issues, if you will. And to your point, the staff, there's 14 of us down here, and they work tremendously hard to get things accomplished in the best means possible. So just some things that we already all know. The town of Londonderry has been heavily invested in modernizing their facilities in the past 20 plus years. That's kudos to everybody in the room, right, wrong, or indifferent, that we all have our opinions and whatnot. The town of Londonderry has some phenomenal facilities. We have a brand new, I say brand new, but in my mind, anything less than 20 years is pretty impressive. So it's been quite a run for the town of Londonderry. New North Side Fire Station, a rebuilt, remodeled, if you will, enhanced, new, centralized, very modern facility, impressive facility. The South Fire Station was built some time ago. I remember what it was like when it was over by the common man there, or whatever. A new town hall as we stand in here today. Certainly a modern police station, another very impressive facility. And the Leach Library with the additions, the renovations, and also to mention the senior center had a very nice upgrade to that location as well. So it begs the question for me, what's with Public Works? Were we overlooked? Were there other things that we just couldn't meet that challenge that we had to turn our focuses to as well, and whatnot? And I'm not saying that in any way that anything was done wrong, but perhaps now is the time that to possibly talk about this. So the main area of concerns that we're going to have, I'll address, is some of the site conditions that we have down there, the way that we store materials that we work with day in and day out and year round. Certainly our storage equipment is getting extremely expensive, and I have concerns about the way that we store it. I mean, when we're purchasing trucks now that are in excess of $200,000 each, I think that we need to start to find ways to prolong how long we have that in our operation, as opposed to just putting it on a 10-year cycle and getting another one. And those 10-year cycles are hard cycles for these trucks, and I like to see us to try and preserve them a little bit longer. We have some definitive facility inadequacies down there that you'll be seeing here a little later on that create operational efficiencies. And like, the chairman stated so eloquently, that, the employee safety and the work conditions for our staff is of concern in a way that, you know, we want to make sure that, again, we're being efficient, we're doing things safe in a good manner. So kind of pull back the curtains here on some of this stuff. And, yeah, get a little creative. I know. My wife might differ with you on that. I'm sure she's watching at home, and I'll get a full critique of this when I get home. Love you, hon. All right, so site conditions. I'd say approximately 25% of our site at 120 High Range Road is paved. But what that does is, you know, and with the heavy equipment that we use in and around our property and coming and going and whatnot, and lack of drainage and what have you on the property, we have muddy parking areas. This is an area right outside the building, where the employee building, where we park, and it's very self-explanatory. We get rain, we get snow, we get ice. It creates problems all around the property. Our materials are extremely important to us when we need them. This is our sand pile that we use on the roads in the wintertime, and we don't have an adequate sized shed to keep and house enough tonnage of the winter sand mix. So, and you'll see a little later on some of the problems that causes. In fact, on this very day that I took this shot, we had just smoothed that area out to where we drive into the back to get some of the sand, and the animal control officer had come down to grab a bucket of sand for a little situation he had going on, and he sunk right out of sight in there, so we had to pull him out of there. But at any rate, so, you know, it's difficult on the employees, it's difficult on the equipment, and trying to keep it clean and get all that mess and whatnot off the equipment as well. You can see we're constantly backblading and trying to smooth things out to either let them freeze or dry out, and then when they dry out, like in this time of year, now it becomes a dust bowl down there. Another challenge. So, more on the site conditions. Is ice. That's a major concern, especially our employee parking area. You can see their foot tracks in the snow and the ice and whatnot. After working long shifts, you know, you get nervous watching the employees walk out there tired. They're trying to go to their cars, and they certainly don't look like the parking lots of the roads that we plow and do such a good job on. But it's tough to plow some of the parking areas that are just dirt or mud or gravel. Creates, you know, issues and concern walking around the property. Again, you can see some of the efforts of some of the backblading that we try to. You can see some of the hot top is broken up in the corner there as well, if you want to call it that. And we have to create these swales in and around our property to get the water to try to run out of there best we can. So when employees got to go and maybe go get another spare plow, and bear in mind that all these pictures are, most of these pictures are taken in, you know, good controlled environments. This is not at nighttime when the employees have to go out there. It's pouring rain, mixture of snow and whatnot. It's dark on the property, and they got to kind of watch their step as they go. So we have slow runoffs for the water. This is another parking area on the side of the building. Might be a little bit difficult to see, but I'll point it out there. A lot of the water slowly runs off into that corner where we park, and then it freezes and creates ice around the employees' cars and whatnot, and they got to step on that to get into their vehicles. So we do have a lot of ponding water around the property. Right dead center of our yard, we have this kind of makeshift retention pond, if you will.
So you've been hiding the town swimming pool?
Yeah, there you go. Put a water. Well, you can see we got a ducky up there, and we got some other little things to try to dress it up a little.
That was good.
But
Ted.
we haven't.
You're welcome.
We haven't put a fountain in the middle yet, so it's not quite that fancy.
How deep is that?
It's about 6 feet, maybe at best.
Maybe if we put a fountain in the middle, people would throw coins in, and then we
There you
could pay
go.
for
There you go.
Yeah.
We got our funding source right there. But at any rate, so the water gets there in a variety of ways. When we wash our vehicles inside that building, that we'll discuss a little bit further down the line, we actually the building's floor was contoured because the water is not allowed to go into a basin without an oil separator and whatnot outside the building. So they took out the drainage inside the building and just let it sheet flow out of the building and then across the parking lot into that pond, which then creates ice where the guy's got to walk in and out of that door or into the side door. It then, when it gets too full, it exits that point and runs down along the side of the property down to the back where a lot of the mechanics and some of the other equipment is stored. So you can see my concerns about that. Moving on to material storage. We have an undersized sand salt mix shed, as I discussed earlier, and that's there in the upper left-hand corner. It's a shed that was built in 1981. Best I could find out was estimated about $8,000. So I think we've gotten our lifespan and our penny's worth out of that building. It stores about 250 tons of salt sand mix, and we use about 2,500 tons. So in a little while, you'll see the process we do to make that mix of sand and salt. And when you're doing that on the fly, in your operation, and you're trying to go through that mud path to get back, and the material's all under snow and all the rain and everything, precipitation from all winter, and you're trying to blend that and then put it in a truck. It's better if you have all that done, prior to the season and stored away dry, so that when you're using it, it's better for the conditions out there and better on the equipment. The building in the back you see was then their, I guess you'd call their first salt building, if you will, built in '86 for about $50,000, and it has a 1,200 ton capacity. You can almost see that there's almost like a back-to-back building there. They did expand that building at some point in time, but I wasn't unable to ascertain when that happened. But it does hold 1,200 tons of salt in that building. But they're small, and they're tight. They're sized for equipment probably perhaps of yesteryear. This is our more new salt building, if you will. It's built in 2008 for $225,000, and that holds 1,500 tons of salt. So between the two salt buildings, we do have 2,700 tons of salt on hand. But again, they're in different buildings on different angles around that pond, and you can see that presents some challenges for when we have deliveries and whatnot. We stack it as high as we possibly can.
So I'm getting indications.
Yeah,
we
if
got
you
a
need
couple of
questions.
Dave, real quick question, because some people may not know. Why do we need salt sheds? Why don't we just leave it exposed?
Well, a couple reasons for that. One, it'll make the material just as bad as the salt sand mix that we're using, but two, it's also a requirement of state law too. It has to be covered. Yeah.
Thank
That's a Water Protection Act type thing.
Thank you.
Yep.
Do we ever get replenished mid-year, or I'm sorry, mid-winter season with
On salt? It's a constant flow.
Okay.
Yeah, we like to try to, if we go out and we use, 300, 400, 600 tons of salt, we'll call the vendor and get an order in and get them going, because it'll trickle in.
Okay, so I'm assuming that deliveries cost money as well.
It's a annual state bid contract that we piggyback on with the state, and the cost is set, so it's a per ton delivery price. That includes delivery.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So again, like I said, between the two buildings, we have about 2,700 tons. We do use 3,600 tons, so like I said, we do like to keep that replenished. There was a time, probably 20 years ago, where there was a salt shortage in the state, and we were all scrambling to try and get salt. But we're pretty fortunate where we have the two buildings, and we can almost store all of the salt that we need to get through a season. And then more importantly, too, all our construction materials uncovered. This was kind of my opening picture there, and you can see that, our gravels, again, our straight sand and whatnot is not covered. And so when you need it, you need to use that, and sometimes it'll delay our projects a little bit if, your gravel bin is all completely soaked. So sometimes if we know we got a big project coming out, we may even wait and then have it brought in later. And then speaking of potholes, Chairman, we do have a cold patch bin there. As you can see, it's fairly inadequate. It's not really constructed properly per se. They've made use. The cover to keep the water, it's important to keep the water out of that material, so when you go to use it, it's still pliable and you can compact it for the temporary measures. But, they got creative and they needed a roof on it, so they must have had an old dump body kicking around somewhere, and they took that off the truck and put it on top and then cut it so that they could get the loader bucket in there to scoop it out. Now the other types of materials that we store, we have a variety outbuildings, I call them, but storage structures, if you will. There's 9 of them on the property that we utilize, and they're mostly in the forms of trailers, sheds, old buildings that came from, I've heard stories of this was behind the old fire station, this was at the police department. At least in my time here, we moved the shed from right out here in front of Town Hall that was utilized previously by the maintenance crew at the library, and we moved that to the DPW and made use of it. And you'll see why in a moment. But old trailer bodies, and we store things in, on, under, all around them, in every way, shape, or form to try and keep things so that they're out of the elements that we're dealing with. And so what you see is you end up with, at the back of this trailer, which you can see is not very weather tight. There's a lot of water gets in there and it gets moldy and whatnot. But there's our air compressor, and then in front of that is the roller. So if you need one or the other, you may have to move things around. This trailer right here actually was in the town hall parking lot when I arrived here. There's very minimal storage within this building itself, but there's a lot of things that are seasonal and are needed. You see the Memorial Day flags, 4th of July flags, if you will. A lot of the PPE equipment is in there from when we did the elections, the plexiglass and whatnot. A lot of the things for the cemeteries are in there, veteran markers, the gear, if you will, for when we dig cremation graves and whatnot, and a variety of other things, some tables for town hall and other functions and whatnot that are all stored in that building. The flags for, vote here, and the stands and the bases and whatnot. We actually pulled some stuff out of there so we could at least kind of get an idea of what's in it. And we rent that at, $65 a month because we didn't have the space here at town hall. I at least had it moved over to the DPW, freed up a parking space here because parking is always a challenge at town hall, and you got to have that some place that's really dry and clean. And that particular Connex was brand new, so it's doing the job. You probably notice on top of that trailer is the stairs that we store for the Old Homes Day that we hook on the trailer for dignitaries and whatnot to get up on when we're doing the parade. This other trailer is where we had a bunch of the sand barrels you can see there, other traffic control devices and what have you. And, some of these trailers and whatnot are were to meet the grades and whatnot. They're kind of installed in a fashion that's of concern and probably should be addressed in the not so distant future.
So the trailer is overhanging
Yeah, so the second photo from the top left there, those 2 trailers, that's the back end of them. They're up on, some cement piers and
they're overhanging like a drop
yeah,
off.
it's a drop off, a slope, and it's to keep them level for a lot of the equipment that's inside it, for obvious reasons. So,
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. And like I said, some of these, they're old, so they're not exactly weather tight anymore. They're not ventilated very well. Somewhat unstable. They're impractical, borderline unsafe. They're not lit, so if you're in there in the nighttime trying to get something and there's no power and whatnot. So again, we're challenged with storage. Now we're moving inside the facility, if you will, that we have there on site. This is how we get our hands on some bins and whatnot, and we screw them up to the wall because we don't have the floor space so that we can store, our cutting edges and whatnot on the floor. Those are extremely heavy, so you don't want those hanging off the wall. Various tools and whatnot all hanging on the walls. At the far end of that photo is where a lot of our power hand tools, chainsaws, backpack blowers, and things of that nature are stored. This is the old break room in that building. So when we got that shed from the library, we were able to put some cones and whatnot in there, and then we recaptured this area, and we really tried to, again, tuck things away where we can. So in the middle of the night, someone takes down a stop sign, or we have to quickly set up a roadblock or a detour or something like that, or whatnot. They have some stuff that's at least readily available, and they're not digging around in the dark and trying to get everything that we need. This is an example of our parts room, which is upstairs. And that's our main electrical panel right there that comes in and supplies power to the building. As you can see, we have a lot of items stored in front of it, which is something we're really not supposed to do. But again, you got to keep things off the floor and out of the way. This is some of the mechanics' work area. Small, the bench is tight to work on, and this is their grinding and welding area, if you will. And so, what it encourages, and unfortunately, you know, they store things up too high where they shouldn't be. You know, where they got to reach overhead or get a ladder, and now something falls. When the Department of Labor came in and did a little evaluation, they made us put up some chicken wire up top of that parts room just so that things might not fall off that and hit somebody when they're walking by. And we built a sound room around the air compressor there so that it's not so loud when the employees are trying to work. But then, of course, that creates a shelf, so now they're putting stuff up on top of that. And I'm not, you know, we do what we got to do. So it creates, you know, like I said, narrow workspaces on the work surfaces and whatnot. And, you know, that right there is a cutoff saw mounted on the cinder block wall. Probably not the best way to do things, but again, we make it work. And so this is our parts room, which is at the top of the flight of those stairs, which is of concern. You know, you're up there, you're getting parts and whatnot, going up and down stairs and carrying things. That's another concern of mine. A lot of flammable materials in this building, and if you're over 5'9", like one of our mechanics is, he's got to watch his head when he's up there. I'm 5'10", so even me, I'm crouched down a little bit. But I just shaved my hair a little shorter so it doesn't happen. But trying to break it up here a little bit, folks. You know, I know this is really stimulating conversation stuff, but it is important. It's very important. So this is another one of our storage rooms, and it has a lot of flammable things in there. We have them in the cabinets and whatnot, but our oils here, some of the crude oil is stored here. A lot of the, you know, the sprays and cleaners and disinfectants and things like that are all in there. And I just, you know, I'm going to reiterate a bunch of times here, there's no sprinkler or fire system. There's no ventilation system in there. So when people are welding, cutting, torching, you know, we all need to make sure that we're doing that in the safest way possible because, you know, the buildings, again, it's not sprinklered. Now we'll get into our equipment. You know, that's stored outside. The lion's share of it, I would say, is stored outside year round. It's in the sun, the rain, snow and ice. Again, it's parked in that mud, and dust bowls and whatnot. Critters and rodents get in there when they're trying to find warmth. And so, you know, all this equipment is exposed to that year round. I just did a quick analysis of the equipment that's sitting there. In fact, you see the white pickup truck. That's actually the things you don't think about, but that's the recreations truck that they use when they're cutting grass and whatnot, and they need a place to store it in the wintertime, and they bring it down to our yard, and that's where it sits. And, you know, the value of that equipment that's sitting there is about $600,000. All of our 1-tons stay outside year-round as well. Those are our workhorses of our department. Those go out on the road pretty much every day, year-round. Whether we're plowing with them, hauling material, going out doing roadside things, it's the things that the crews use to go to their job sites. And those have a value of about $260,000. A couple of our other large trucks, we don't have enough room under the canopy that we park some of the larger trucks outside under. So a couple of them do end up staying outdoors regardless. And those two have an estimation of $380,000 in value. On the back side of the building, you'll see the old famous van there that we utilize on occasion. And by my predecessor especially, Steve Cotton, that was his mobile office, if you will. And so, you know, there it sits with our catch basin cleaning truck. And those two things have a value of $235,000. So I'll just show you real quickly some more of the elements. You know, even though these trucks are underneath the hangovers, they're still susceptible to, you can see the sign there, snow, falling ice, rain, whatnot. And there it was, it slid off when I took the photo. So, and then we have another lean-to pole barn, if you will, which is on the end of that salt sand shed, where we have a variety of things under there, the crack sealing machine, chippers, air compressors and whatnot, but they're all still somewhat exposed to the elements of the weather. And this was just a quick video to show, you know, the amount of rain that pours off of it. And then, we're battling it on the property because we don't have drainage down there, so we got to deal with that type of runoff. Moving on to just the garage, and I've already touched base with it, so I know it's been a long evening so far, so I'll try and move it along here. But we don't have a room for a crimping machine, so when we blow a hydraulic line, we have a variety of lengths of hoses that we just buy pre-made. We just simply don't have the room for a crimping machine down there, and that's unfortunate because, if you have a 15-foot main line that blows on a truck and you got to section it together with 3 different parts, you're also having 3 imperfections in that line. And you're not likely to go back and, take it out and get one made appropriately. So, but we do the best we can with what we have. So we have, again, a variety of hoses laying around in that upstairs parts room. And they're very tight work quarters. Right here you can see, we kind of put the truck to the side so that if somebody has to kind of pull in and do something, we can move it over. But that's an employee right there working in tight quarters against the wall. There's another employee laying on the floor, trying to get underneath that truck. And then, if they're doing that and you have an employee inside the building on the far end of it, he's washing. There's a lot of water flying around and aggressive elements. And that's an employee that's actually climbed up on the frame, again, trying to get at everything that's underneath that truck, but not being able to do it necessarily in the best way possible. It's safe there. We have a brace, so we're not violating any OSHA rules. But he could still slip and he could still hurt himself. So there's things like that.
Do we have any pits or lifts or anything?
No, the facility just cannot. It's not designed to set up in that way. Probably should have let off with the size of the building and everything first, but I'll get to it. So spare parts and the tools are located in trailers. We touched on that earlier. These are those ones that are up on the stilts, if you will. So if a mechanic needs a tire, he's got to go out there, kind of wrestle it around. You'll see in the front of that the spare chains. Those are the spreader chains that actually convey the salt off the trucks. A variety of tools in here, compactors, shelves, air compressors, and whatnot, too. And, they wrestle those things around, and that's some of my concern with those 2 particular trailers.
So Dave, we've got an inadequate facility. What do we do?
Well, I'm almost there. Give me 5 more minutes. I waited a long time to get this presentation out here.
Okay,
I know there's a lot going on in town.
Well, listen, I think everybody's hearing you.
All right. So the exciting stuff's coming. Just trust me. All right. So the building that they're working out of was built in 1971. So just date myself a little bit younger than me, but nonetheless, it's there. It's only 3,200 square feet, which I did some quick calculation in this room. It's only about 2.5 times the size of this room that we work on large equipment and whatnot in the town's fleet. It was built for $27,000. So again, I think we've gotten our value out of that building. It's really creating limitations on our ability for our work schedule, because when you have one thing you're trying to do, like wash trucks off, it impacts somebody working directly side by side with them. If this is a great illustration, the mechanics in that photo are trying to work on the truck, and you got the gentleman behind them, blasting salt off the truck and water's flying everywhere. And it really makes for a pretty difficult work environment in such a small, tight quarters. In fact, that top right corner photo, you'll see the garage door there doesn't allow us for that truck to go through that door. It's too small. So when that mechanic is done working on that truck, if the gentleman is still washing that truck behind him, he's got to stop, break it down, pull that truck out so the mechanic can get that truck out, bring in another truck, and then he can go back to resume into washing. So it just slows things down. It really closes down the garage. It's sometimes they're just singular tasks. For example, when we're trying to rehab a loader and we're going to do some painting and welding fabrication, they got to take over the whole garage because the ventilation's poor. And when you're trying to paint something, you can't have guys opening the doors and dust blowing up and whatnot. It's just not good for when you're trying to prepare something for painting.
I will note the excellent job of the rehab on the loader, to the point that the fire chief, who's very particular about gear, thought that it was a brand new loader when you guys are done with the quality of work.
They do. The guys do a phenomenal job. And for me, that's one of the things that, like, geez, if we had this, how much more could we do? Yep. What higher level of a service we could provide to the taxpayers of Londonderry? And again, the welding area, I won't harp on So it creates some operational inefficiencies, and I'll kind of go through these quickly. You've already seen some of this stuff, and I've talked about it. You know, we sometimes we do some of the grinding and whatnot outside, and he's doing some blasting of the paint there. You certainly don't want to do that inside the facility. But so this is some of the problems we have when we're trying to load. So you're wondering, you're like, where are they? They're not out here plowing. Why haven't they put sand down on the street yet and whatnot? And well, they're mixing up, you know, some salt and sand mix because we're out, and they're loading it onto the trucks. And, you know, because of the moisture content that's now in the sand and what have you, it clumps up a lot on the screens. So as they're loading it, what you'll see now is he's actually putting the dump body off to try to get some of it to slide through the screens and whatnot. And you'll see some of it actually slides off the truck and what have you. And then that creates issues because now the next truck's driving up over that pile. He's trying to get loaded. But it just slows down the process of getting the trucks back out there onto the street and getting things wrapped up and what have you. This was a good moment towards the end of one of the storms where we had snow and sleet. You can kind of see it there coming down in that event. And we really wanted to get that sand and that material out on the road as quickly as possible. But, you know, due to the inefficiencies of the material and the storage of that material, this is sometimes what ends up happening. And so, you know, you just end up with an inferior product. And also, you know, it clumps on the screens and the belts. And then that also wears on the equipment. It makes the hydraulics work harder as it's trying to pull it off. It sometimes will jam up the chain and what have you. And then you can see the rest of the trucks there. And again, it sometimes when we try and watch, if we get around freezing or maybe a little bit higher, it's not pleasant, but sometimes, you know, we've got to get this equipment clean. And so it puts them outside in the weather, and you can see our good employee here, he's out there in the cold and whatnot, and he's spraying that water, and he's standing on that frame. And if that starts to freeze on that frame and he slips, you know, we can't, you know, you never want to lose an employee no matter what, but we're just such a small staff that it really has a giant impact when you lose even an employee for a little while. Now, it's not all, you know, this is just stuff of concern, but, you know, our building that we have there, it was built in 2015 for the employees. It was appropriately sized, I think, for where the department is then and now. As far as, you know, for a break room and whatnot, it was built for the cost of about $180,000. But the locker room it probably should have been a little bit bigger for the amount of gear that these guys have. So it creates a little bit of limited workspace. They're still utilizing the old lockers in the old building for the additional gear that they have. And even the mechanics put their stuff in that flammable room as well, because we just don't have enough room in that building for all the other additional lockers. And so I touched on this earlier. You got to move equipment to get it equipment. This is one of our sheds, so if the guy's going to go out and use that lawnmower, he's going to move the paint machine and vice versa. We have to move supplies to get it supplies. This is another shed. I don't know where this one came from. It's been there a while. But, you know, we have, you know, ice melt in the front and some speedy dry, but in the back is some of the mortar and stuff that you need to go on basin jobs. So you're constantly moving things around in order to get it, you know, that's time and effort. And again, you can see my footprints there in the snow when I took that photo. So, you know, they're also having to, you know, just reiterate that about moving around the property. And we have limited backup power to the garage. We have a generator for the employee building that I touched on, but the garage itself is not fully powered. So, and that's probably the most important thing, because we really, when we have to work on equipment in the middle of a snow event, you know, that's usually when we're losing power, because, you know, trees are down and wires are down, and so that creates some challenges as well. And I just want to praise the board because, you know, you've all been great at recognizing the fact that we are first responders. We're out there when the elements are at their worst, and people's lives are being impacted in ways that are sometimes unimaginable. But everything that we do is in response to you. So, you know, we're not just waiting for these calls to come in. You know, we do provide a very high level of service with what we have to work with. And we know that our charge is to make sure that, you know, the firefighters and the medics and the police officers and whatnot, when they got to get to a home, you know, the gentleman here had a very nice story that he shared with us earlier about Musquatch. Now, you know, let's pretend that that's in the wintertime. You know, this last storm we had was the one that I was concerned with the most when I got here, that how vulnerable we are when we finally get back into some real, you know, really tough storms in New England. That 16-inch storm in early March there was a brute, and it took 2 of our trucks out, and so that created some challenges. And around the property, that trailer there is actually where we store our signs, and you can see we have, you know, some stairs that go up to it, no railing, they're very unlevel. So I'm constantly worrying about guys slip tripping and falling. I'm worried about guys, you know, falling down those stairs, taking parts down to work on a truck, you know, or banging their head. We transport the crude oil that's dropped off for the volunteers and whatnot behind the fire station, and we pump it into 55-gallon drums and strap them into a loader and drive them across town, and then transfer them into our tank after we screen them and screen it and whatnot, make sure there's nothing in there that can harm our waste oil furnace that heats that building. And that's kind of an inefficient, and there's other concerns that I have there with that, the way we transport it. But, you know, this is our above-ground diesel fuel tank. There's also another one behind Central Fire, for those of you that don't know. That's a diesel and gas, but they're both above ground. You know, you got to climb ladders to get up on them, and when there's ice and snow, that's a concern. And here's where we fuel up. So, again, there's that set of stairs, our fueling, and whatnot. Nothing's undercover, and have you. And then, again, back to the parking lot. So at the end of the day, the guys go home, and that's what they got to kind of traverse across to get to their personal vehicles after a 36-hour shift, a 48-hour shift. So, Chairman says, okay, so we know it's tough. It's not perfect down there. Where are we going? Well, that's what I'm doing here tonight. I think that it's time to kind of talk about some of this stuff. I've shed some light on it. It's out there. And now maybe perhaps people can start to understand some of the challenges we have on why some of the services that have been asked about, why we can't bring that to the town of Londonderry, at least in our current state. But what I've been doing patiently for 2 years, too, is also listening to a great deal of other people within the town, too, and other challenges that the town has, like storage and whatnot. So really what I think needs to happen is we need to do, you know, perhaps a spatial needs analysis, do some sort of efficiency audit on how we do things and whatnot to determine what would be an appropriately sized facility. Examine the current location that we're at versus an alternate location. Just calm down. You know, we've been there a long time. I've got some ideas on where we could relocate. I know they're going to be controversial, but location, right? And so, you know, we certainly could do what we need to do there on that site and stay there. But if we're interested in solving some of the other challenges that Londonderry is facing, and incorporate that into this project, then I think perhaps maybe that's something worth discussing. All right.
So just for clarification
Sure.
purposes, certainly going to have this discussion here, but so people know, this all has to run through the CIP committee first.
100%. 100%. This is step one of many, if you will. I didn't think it would be appropriate to just, you know, jump right into the CIP process with at least, you know, enlightening people to why we're entering the CIP process. And that's kind of what this is. Okay. It's just information. This is just ideas. I got a lot of them banging around in my head. Some are good, some are horrible, and whatnot. So we're going to work our way through it. You know, what are the things that we would like to look at? Fleet management for all vehicles, whether it be our equipment, town hall equipment, perhaps assisting fire department in some fashion and whatnot with the design of the facility. A fuel farm that is for all departments, schools, whatnot, all in one location of space that could free up potential space behind the central fire station. For those of you that don't know, the fire department actually does a lot of training down at our yard because they just don't have the room on their own properties to do what they do. So they'll come down and bring a wrecked vehicle or whatnot, and so that creates some operational efficiencies for them and challenges for them because even though they're training, you know, they get a call, they got to go, so they got to bring more people over across town to do that training than perhaps maybe just doing it right in their own backyard. At least that's my crude understanding from talking with the fire chief and some of his command staff. Relocate that waste oil drop-off, that would free up space at Central Fire Station. And it would also allow us to just have it there right on site for us to use and not have to transport it across the roadway. Free up some office space potentially, some storage space at Town Hall, which we have challenges in this building along with that in regards to that. There's potential for additional parking freed up at Town Hall. Relocating the drop-off center is something that I just threw in here because I know it's such a hot topic within this town. But I didn't get into this because it's really not my area to poke my nose into it or whatnot. That's the engineering department, environmental services, and what have you. But I think it's fairly obvious that we don't have to have a long-winded PowerPoint presentation like I've got going on right now. But to realize that they're remote down there, they don't have water, cell phone is sparse down there and whatnot, and it's a tough area that if you wanted to do year-round access, you really have to invest some money into that site. And so anyway, it might be worth exploring because if their facility was adjacent to ours, that would make it probably potentially possible. And create some more storage units. I talked to the PD, the chiefs, and their command staff. They're always looking for places to store things that you don't even think about, that they need from time to time, and it's creating some constraints for them in their own facilities. Storage for files and whatnot. We do pay to store a lot of our files and whatnot off site. So perhaps it's time to think that we could do something, in our facility that keep it secure. And then there's the initiatives of Go Green. We heard some presentations tonight talking about energy and where we're going. We know we can't stay the course of the way we've been doing it forever in our country. I think that's a global issue as well. And perhaps that's something that we explore in this project if we want to. Certainly the wash facility is one of my big things. We've got to start taking care of our equipment better with the way that we wash it and store it. It's just, this stuff is very costly. These trucks cost a lot of money. We've got to try and get some more longevity out of them. They're in aggressive elements, carrying the most aggressive materials and what have you, and we've got to start maintaining them in a better manner. And the list goes on and on. So, modern facility, I just picked these randomly off the internet, of what some DPWs look like, but this would all be vetted out, through a process of a design phase and whatnot after we do like a spatial needs analysis and what have you. So that's a fairly small one. This is a real grand one. There's some that blend into the landscapes a little bit easier and whatnot. And then I chose this one because I actually thought it kind of looked like the police department. And so, if we chose to bring something like that to this area, the central part of town, where there's water, where there's sewer, where there's natural gas, it would be easier to design a facility to meet our needs. Have more accommodating locker room. You can see the lockers are oversized for all their turnout gear. I love this locker room because you can clean it easily. I mean, there's nothing there obstructing a mop or a broom. Even the bench is designed in a manner that keeps things. These guys get a lot of dirt and mud. Even if we had our whole place was paved, you still get a lot of material on your work boots at the end of a work day. Muster rooms are designed now for multifunctional. You can have meetings. You can use it as a lunchroom. You can use it for a training area. And for when we're there, long hours and whatnot, they can have enough room to make something quick to eat or heat up and get back at it. Fleet management, I can't impress upon you enough. I mean, we need a facility. We contract out some of our stuff to go and get worked on. I like this photo because it shows a town car being worked on. It shows the ability for a fire apparatus to be pulled in there if they need to do something to their piece of equipment. You've got the lifts, you've got the bays, you've got the modernized equipment, so that we can do a lot of that in-house stuff right here, which I think we can personally do better ourselves than sending it out. And some of the costs that we're seeing sending this stuff out, the challenges that all the trades are facing right now. Some of these hourly rates are just incredible. And plus the timeliness. Because they're shorthanded, we can't just send a salt truck out in February and send it up to Donovan Springs and say, hey, and get it back in 3 weeks. A lot can happen in 24 hours in the middle of February, never mind a couple of weeks. So we would have the ability to do that. This is a very large style DPW where they have pretty much all their pieces of equipment undercover. They do have an upper mezzanine and whatnot, but it kind of gives you the idea of what the scope of what I'm talking about and the appropriate drainage in the flooring. Their parts room as well, stored, neat, clean, orderly. And then again, being able to wash on the equipment safely, adequately, and preserve the life of that expensive truck. That's the type of wash bay that you can design. You see the catwalk so they can get up on top. They're not climbing on the truck. They're not falling off of it. They're not doing it outside where it's cold. You've got your floor drain that leads to recapturing some of that, and then making sure that it's not contaminated water going out into the wastelands and whatnot. That's the type of fuel farm I'm talking about. I was involved with a process like that in my previous employment. Came out fantastic, serving the needs of that community well for a long time. And there's a lot of benefits, too, to having their tanks underground. We have to constantly add additives to our tanks that are above ground because the diesel fuel will gel up and whatnot, which is then hotter on the trucks and creates more operational issues. It's all connected. Perhaps a larger style storage facility so that we have the right amount of clean, dry, effective material on hand. This one kind of looks like ours as well, but it's much larger. You can see the doors more accommodating for deliveries and what have you. And, if you wanted a year-round drop-off center, again, I didn't really get into this too much, but if something like this was adjacent to us and you had it, mostly undercover, but it was right, adjacent to our backyard, then it'd be easy for us to, perhaps go over and clear the snow real quickly and whatnot. And, if that's something that wants to be explored by the town and whatnot. That's a different conversation for a different time. And, go green. So where's some of my folks about? So you got your solar panels. This facility right here was built in Rochester. Ironically enough, we just had a UNHT squared training class down there. We sent some employees down to, and they were blown away with that facility. That's on a pretty small lot. They did a very good job at getting a lot compacted and on that site for material storage and everything else. There are other things too that that I didn't put in this presentation too, but like the sand barrels around town. That caused me a little bit of anxiety. The people out there on the side of the roads in the dark, there's limited daylight and, they're getting stuff. And so perhaps, there'd be an area that would be available 24 hours at a new facility that's accessible to the public. They could do it, in under a light or whatnot. And then, here we go. So electric vehicles are coming. I'm not my own personal thing. I'm not a big fan of them, but it's coming. And there's perhaps a lot of things. I've had discussions with the police department. They see a lot of potential sometimes, and I don't want to speak for the police. I'm not. It's just very candid conversations. But some of the smaller vehicles and things like that, even the town vehicles and whatnot, certainly could go electric and into the future. And so, if we were in close proximity to this area in the central part of town, we could build something like this. This one is over in Europe. It's pretty fancy, but. And so we're just basically bound by the limitations of our facility. Maybe perhaps one of our councilors might recognize that tank in the back of that truck, but we put it to use. Thank you for the donation. So if we had certain things, what could we perform? So if we had a vac jet truck, which we can't bring to where our current status is. So what we did there was fill that tank up with water because we had a clogged culvert, and just kind of let gravity hopefully blow it, flush it out. And it worked. These guys get pretty ingenious at times, and it worked. But we could do some more jetting and drain lines. That would help us be with our MS4 compliance and whatnot, with cleaning of basins and what have you. Certainly vac jet trucks do a much better job at cleaning the basins than our old style type of clam truck. Street sweeping, we don't do it. We should be doing it. There's certainly are places in town that we need it desperately, and that helps us with our MS4 compliance as well. We have guys still doing it the old-fashioned way at times, using the old-fashioned broom and brooming up sand and using, sometimes we do backpack blowers, but it's a beautiful spring day. We finally gotten through the rigors of winter, and everybody's got their windows open, and here comes us making noise and blowing sand and dust all over the place and coming in people's homes, and it makes for a miserable experience for them. So sometimes we have to just do it the old-fashioned way. You know, we could get into, you know, some mowers and perhaps lawn maintenance, and, you know, if we had a larger facility, maybe we could get summer help to come in and help us out with some of the mowing and whatnot. You know, college kids are always looking for work like that. They'll go and cut the grass and whatnot, but we just don't have the place to house them, or even the lawnmowers for that matter. Sidewalk machine, we could do the sidewalks. You know, a hot box, which is, you know, you can go and get asphalt, and, you know, you can go fill your potholes with that. That's going to last you far longer than cold patch will. But again, I can't justify buying a $50,000 to $75,000 piece of equipment, or even a $100,000 sidewalk machine, and go put it in the mud. You know, we can't do that. So we're our hands are tied. And then there's the other option too of, you know, bulk liquid for calcium and stuff that could help us in the wintertime when we get into these real cold, frigid times. Using liquid calcium, you know, I've seen it in my previous employment. I mean, sometimes we'll put out 3 rounds of salt here, and if you just did 1 round of salt with the sprayed on liquid calcium, you're good. You'll get another 6, 7, 8 hours out of that round. So you're saving money on the other end with not having to do so many repetitive salting operations. In the last few years, have really been a lot of this snow and sleet and ice and back and forth. So we're using a lot of salt. That's usually a larger portion of your budget. And so that's it. Sorry for the long amount of time that I took tonight, but I just want to be as informative as I can and entertain any questions that you might have at this time.
Dave, real quick question.
Yes, sir.
Do you have an eye on another piece of property?
All right. You want me to let the cat out of the bag?
Sooner or later, it's coming out.
I will, but I'll be brief. But so the parcel that is right next to Town Hall here.
Yeah, I know what you want.
That we just discussed earlier about, the apple orchard. But, you know, that 5 acres was bought with the idea or understanding that someday there may be a need to put a municipal facility there. And so I eyed it, and I thought it's got sewer, it's got water, it's got natural gas, it's got a lot of sunlight for solar. We could take care of a lot of issues if we were located there. We would bring us into the central part of town. Responses to the other part of town would be easier. You think about, I mean, the amount of salt we have delivered to our facility, right? Almost 4,000 tons a year. Well, that's going to drive over Pillsbury Road, and it's going to drive over, High Range Road and everything else to get there. Let's keep them on the state roads, Let's keep them on 93 and right up 28 and up Mammoth Road. Let's not pound our roads down. That's just salt. Let's not talk about the gravel and everything else. So, that's a small thing, but it makes sense. And again, I could be selfish and just focus on public works needs, but again, like I stated at the beginning of this presentation, I've been a member of this community for almost 25 years. I've dealt with all kinds of leagues and volunteered and whatnot, and know a great deal amount of people in town. And, so I wouldn't be, recommending this if it wasn't something I thought would be of value to the community. And it would solve a lot of the struggles of the yesteryears and whatnot, and really set us up and prepare us, for the 600 acres that eventually is going to be developed at Woodmont. And we need to be ready for that. And I think, if we're going to take on a task of this size and have a good, healthy debate about it and discussion, we're not going to get everything, but I think we can solve a lot of the challenges that I've been listening to everybody talk about, while working for the town and then previously while living in the town.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
how large was the facility in Rochester? Do you know?
I think it was roughly about 54,000 square feet.
Oh, wow.
I'm trying to remember all the breakdowns.
The
and what they
picture
had.
made it look bigger.
Huh?
The picture made it look bigger.
Yeah, they broke it out into, and that's what they'll do. They'll gauge on well, how many offices we're going to have in there.
Right.
What type of user space you're going to have? How many trucks? Now, you don't want to just build it for just the 16 trucks we got.
No,
you
no.
want to kind of build it spec'd out so that you have room for more growth.
Right. I also see, at least on our GIS system mapping, that right now your buildings are using about 2.5 acres of land, and
Right.
you go a bit further beyond that with all the land usage you're actually using, about 6.2 acres. I guess the real question would be for our assistant manager is how much more of that land would really be usable to build a much larger facility, as we already have that land slated for this facility.
Well, again, that's what, a lot of this study would vet out and see if that would work there. Is it realistic? Is it the right spot? And if it does, it opens up the doors for other opportunities. So what would become of where we are now on High Range Road? Maybe that's where the drop-off center goes. You don't need all the sewer and water infrastructure, but at least we got water there.
Right.
Maybe maybe we sell it. Maybe we use it as an offsetting revenue. I'd like to see the drop-off center adjacent to our facility because I think that gives the town the better ability to, I think that's no secret, right? I think everybody has heard that in one fashion or another, that they want more access to the drop-off center. And I think the only way that you get there is by having it, located closer to us so that logistically you can make it work. That's one opinion anyway.
And I guess the follow-up with your lack of accessibility to the trucks within your own facilities right now, how long does it take when you have a plow truck that breaks down to be able to get it back on the road with everything else that's going on in the facility, with how tight quarters it is, or you have other vehicles in there?
That's a great question. It's a challenging one to answer. I'll just use the last example of the last storm of the season. So one of them broke down. You perhaps saw it parked out there out on 102 at the end of one of the cul-de-sacs that's adjacent to it, across from Home Depot. And unfortunately, all it was a starter. But we just didn't have the ability to, one, get it back to our shop because the mechanics are out plowing. And so, we don't have a full-time chief mechanic that would have been at the yard, loading trucks, keeping the yard open, and then if that happens, he could respond out there and whatnot. So we had to abandon it and leave it there for the remainder of the storm. We had another breakdown happen, but we were able to limp it back and then work on it, and again in tight quarters because of that one-door access only. And again, when we're plowing, it takes 4 or 5 hours, and that storm was taking us about 6-7 hours to get around the beat. So you lose an hour or two out on your road, it's tough. It gets very challenging. I had some grave concerns. I was going around just V-plowing and just opening a hole up down the middle of the road. I conversed with both police and fire department during that event. Hey, if you're having challenges getting around or whatnot, we've made some adjustments for the fire department so that their truck that they have that is relatively old, we're able to stay with their crews and go out in case they found themselves in those scenarios. But it's just my concern, as an emergency responder, as the head of one of the big responders in town, I have concerns about, not meeting the needs of the community. I'm not saying that there's anything to get all of, alarmed about, but as we grow, the challenges are going to become more steep.
Well, and someone who works in construction, the amount of what you're showing on examples of slips and falls and people potentially getting hurt, at least within your own facility, let alone throughout town, by not being able to get your trucks back out there, that's a grave concern to myself.
Yeah.
Last thing we need is someone getting hurt just being able to do their daily job, let alone trying to get back out there, hurry to snowplow again. That's a huge problem. Frankly, I'm surprised that we've let this go on as long as we have.
Yeah, we've had some bangs and bumps and bruises and cuts and whatnot. We're very fortunate no one's gotten gravely hurt. But to your point, where we're behind the 8 ball, and then so employees are rushing. They're a great workforce. I can't say enough about them. They understand what we're charged with, and so when you're rushing, that is usually when the worst case scenario happens. So, thank you.
All right, so we'll digest this,
Okay,
and we'll figure out what next steps are.
great. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.